Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas. Welcome to the Christmas edition of the Sell on Value, Not on Price learning series. SOVNOP, Sell on Value, Not on Price. Bringing you the logical, not linear selling system from Matrix Impact. My name is John C. Kolensik, and you see me down there in the corner, Kolensik, phonetically spelled, and we'll be getting into our presentation here momentarily. But before we get started, first allow me to say thank you for coming aboard today, but most importantly, Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season before we get too far along. Okay, let's get rocking and rolling here. Today, disconnected. How commoditization is derailing your sales. Just as a point of note so everybody knows, this is the third in a series of 4 webinars. So far we've had a little over 700 people attend the first 2 webinars with 300. Today's final total right now as I'm looking at the screen is 336. Point of the story is 1,000 people can't be wrong, and this is worldwide. Over 1,000 people so far have been participating in this webinar series, and I want to thank you to all of them from every country and every state that you've been in. But today, how commoditization is derailing your sales. Let's kind of recap and go exactly from where we're at in the process here. As I talk about, this has been a series. The first seminar that we did, the first webinar we did, we laid out the first 3 pieces, okay? We talked about all 3 of them, communication, commoditization, and conversion, okay? And then we started to break them out. The last time we got together, we talked about what are the problems and how communication derails your sales. Today, we're talking about how commoditization derails your sales, all right? How this part of things will knock you for a loop every time. Wednesday, January 18th at 1:45, we'll be following the final one, conversion, and wrapping everything up then. But for right now, we're going to be talking about the commoditization of sales, what that entails and what the problem is. And to kick that off, I want to go to an old routine from Jeff Foxworthy. You guys might remember it, his famous routine. You might be a redneck if. Well, you guys remember a couple of his old, most memorable lines. You might be a redneck if you think loading the dishwasher means getting your wife drunk. Or you might be a redneck if you ever cut your grass and found a car. Or you might be a redneck if you own a home that's mobile and 5 cars that aren't. Well, in sales, we have an affliction that is far less funny, but much more tragic. When our customers think of us as a commodity, they either can't or don't perceive the difference between us and our competition. And they either have zero recognition of our value product or service or the competition. And as a result, we become this big nebulous blob of protoplasm that they can't define from one thing to another. And I don't know if there's a more deadly 1-2 punch in sales that they don't know the difference between us or the value of our products. And that's going to kill us every time. So in the spirit of Jeff Foxworthy, what we're going to be tackling today are some of these bullet points here and a list of some of the most common and dangerous signs of the affliction. Or as I like to say, you might be a commodity if. You might be a commodity if, after a lead generation campaign, when calling prospects, they don't recognize your name or your company. Or worse, when they hear your name, they go, ugh, hi, John. You might be a commodity if you try and set an appointment with the prospect, and she says, tell you what, call me back in a week and I'll let you know what I want to do then. Never a good sign. You might be a commodity if, after the initial discovery appointment, the customer tells you, you know what, thanks for your time and I'll be in touch. You might be a commodity if that during the presentation you ask your prospect what he likes best and he says, good question, yet he never answers you. That's a pretty sure sign that you're a commodity there. You might be a commodity if you find yourself negotiating on 2 out of every 3 closing presentations. You might be a commodity if, after a presentation, that you attempt to schedule that next step meeting and your prospect says to you, you know, I think we have all the information we need. You might be a commodity if, before the presentation, that they told you that they needed to make a decision by next week and now it's next month and you've still not been able to get them on the phone. You might be a commodity of calling to schedule a next step meeting Your prospect says, can you remind me what this was about again? And finally, you might be a commodity if the closest you ever get to an opportunity at a trade show is somebody who comes to your booth for the free candy and tchotchkes. All of these are dangerous, dangerous, dangerous things, folks, and they're all things that's going to put you forever in the mediocre class, if that. Remember, 75% of all salespeople fail. 75%. And the reason they fail is because they're mediocre, and the reason why they're mediocre is because they're thought of as a commodity. Today what we'll be doing is offering cures to this deadly disease as we go forward. Okay, so before we get started in the rest of the presentation, let's introduce you to some of the people today. First of all, your able host, there I am, John Kolensik, Chief Sales Office of Matrix Impact. And also, today we have a guest speaker. He's our subject matter expert from Monsters Unlimited, Patrick Jebber, and he's a master of creative business design. Patrick, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Patrick, well, we got you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Monsters Unlimited, just so everybody's up to speed?
Well, we're a creative agency with a business brain, and so everyone always asks us what that means. Well, we basically help our clients communicate clearly with their customers and strengthening their relationships and increasing their revenue. And we do this through a variety of marketing channels such as traditional print advertising, web development, social media, email marketing, mobile development. You get it. You get the idea.
Gotcha. Patrick, I got a question for you. Are there any things that you don't work in, any marketplaces that you don't work in?
Not necessarily. I haven't met one yet that we haven't done.
Okay.
But sure, give us enough time, and we'll probably have a marketplace that we don't necessarily cover.
Good. All right. And the reason why I wanted to ask you that, Patrick, specifically was to let everybody know we have such a cross-section of people out there, over 300 plus people today. Make sure you understand Patrick's done just about it all in terms of the marketplaces. And, same thing as myself. I'm sure there's a marketplace that I haven't been in yet, but I don't know it. So, we've covered a lot of different pieces of territory over the years in terms of the different marketplaces that both of us have worked in. All right. Before we get started, reality check. All right, there's only 7.5 days left in 2011, but here's the thing. 2011 can still change for you. Let me give you a short story from 1998, Christmas Eve, 1998. I was sitting in my then office, the first office I had in the storefront, over a little bar in a college town by Baldwin Wallace. If anybody ever heard of the college Baldwin Wallace, it's in a little town called Berea, which is a southwest suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. I had this little two-room office above one of the local bars there, and I'll never forget. It's about 5:30 on Christmas Eve, still getting some things done, and out of the blue I get a phone call, and it's a gentleman who wanted to find out a little bit more about me. He said that he had heard about me from somebody else. He wanted to find out what I can do. And as I started asking some questions, he tells me his name is Stan Rogoff from Rochester Instrument Systems, and what he was looking to do is to put together a program for all his distributor reps that are literally across the country and the world. And he wanted to find a way to do that. Well, we tossed around some ideas and things we could do, and I said, we could get into a lot more detail after the holidays. He goes, oh, no, John. I want to get something wrapped up right now. I go, okay, Stan, tell me how wrapped up, you mean when you say wrapped up. I want you to come out here between Christmas and New Year's to present to me and have an idea, because I want this to happen first quarter, end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter, at that time, 1999. Well, I said, no problem. So I gave him a couple more quick ideas, scheduled the appointment for December 27th at 2 o'clock in Rochester. And as a result, at that time, I got one of the largest deals I ever did. It was one of my first cruises that I did with customers. Since then, Patrick's been part of a couple of the other cruises that I've done with customers, where what we did is we took all their customers, put them on a boat where they couldn't get cell phone reception or anything, and as a result, we had one of the best, informative, but more importantly, engaged audiences you could ever imagine, because they couldn't go anywhere. They were sitting there listening on the boat, plus they had a great time in between everything. My point for telling you this story, it changed my 1998 from an average year to a really good year, and it turned my 1999, from starting off at a lower level to starting off with a huge bang. Folks, 7.5 days is a lifetime in sales, so end strong and start large. January 3rd starts 2012. Where will you be? Is your planning done? Can you hit the ground running? Have you met with your reps and established their plan for 2012? And how about this one? Have you planned your first game changer yet? Okay. Have your first big event where it's going to be about lead generation, pushing things across the board? Have you figured out what that's going to be yet? If you haven't, why haven't you done it? And here's an example of something that you can be talking about. We're going to get into that in a second once we go into the webinar how-tos. All right, first, so you know in the webinar how-tos, this is just so you know how everything works here and make sure that you're comfortable with everything as we go forward. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. So the way we communicate back and forth is two different ways. You have a chat function on your little box off to the right-hand part of your screen, and you also can raise your hand specifically if you have a question. So feel free at any time, if you have a question, send it over in the question box. Or if you have a chat, something you want to get just to me, you can send that over in the chat box. Okay? So before we get going too far, let me ask you guys a question. Are there any problems with what you can see, what you can hear right now? Does everybody hear and see what's going on? All right, let's see. I got something here. Can't hear and see you. Uh-oh. You can't hear me, and I can't hear you. Okay. Cannot hear you. Oh, boy, we got a few people but they can't hear me yet. What time is this supposed to start? Patrick, are we on air? Can you see me, Patrick?
Yeah, I can see you and I can hear you, which is...
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right.
Wow.
Can everybody hear me now? Is everybody there? Can everybody hear me now? Please, somebody jump in there. All right. Getting yeses, getting yeses, getting yeses. Yes, yes, yes. All right. All right. So, last thing about webinar how-tos, I stay on the webinar typically anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour to answer additional questions. Please feel free to stick around there. There's always a lot of questions. Sometimes, we're on here forever answering questions. Sometimes it's only a few minutes, but I'll be on there as long as you want. Patrick will stay on as long as you want to answer any additional questions. Before we get started, any questions for you? Anything that you guys want to make sure that we get going on before we go too far down the line here? Anything specific? Okay. Everybody's saying basically the same thing. Let's get started. Let's get started. Okay. Well, we're going to get started then. First, let's remind you some of the folks you're going to be seeing, some of the folks we're going to be working with throughout today. Okay. As anybody who's been in one of our webinars before, you guys know who these folks are. And for the folks who haven't, let me remind you, this is the Best Practice League. These are the folks who are going to help us out. These are the superheroes who practice the top 7% of any good sales program out there. And the leader of that group, we have Mr. Matrix Man himself. And just so you guys know, Matrix Man, he was modeled after me when I was much younger. So, those biceps and everything else, that's what I looked like when I was in my 20s. But, unfortunately, age has a way of affecting everything. Also, we have on the group of the Best Practice League, left to right, we have our friend Urgent, who keeps us going, keeps us moving forward. Next to Urgent, immediately to his left, we have Coach, who's going to help us out telling us what to do and what not to do. Timetable, who keeps us on track. Question you're going to hear a lot from today. We also have Gauge, who measures everything and hiring and assessment, making sure we're on the right path and doing the right stuff. And then also somebody else who's going to help us out quite a bit today is Contact at the very end there, the pretty redhead. She is our lead generation guru, and she'll be helping us as we go. Well, just like any good superhero team has, if they're a good superhero team, they, of course, have arch villains that they deal with every time that they go up against them, and that is Mob, Masters of Bad Business, led by this guy right here. His name is Dr. Know-It-All. And Dr. Know-It-All is that guy who thinks he always knows more than the person next to him and many times more than the customer sitting next to him. And down at the bottom here, you got a couple of his cohorts. You've got the Master Manipulator. You've got Time Thief. You've got Disogre, Ogre is one of those people who he's a monster, because what he does is he can steal time from you, and him and Time Thief work together all the time, because when you're disorganized, you're going to be losing time. And then finally, you got Mr. Presentation over here. Mr. Presentation we're going to be hearing from today too, because he's the guy that kills us, absolutely kills us when we're talking to a customer, and he's one of the guys who can affect us becoming a commodity or not becoming a commodity. All right, these are the folks who are going to be helping us. So let's jump right into it, all right? Let's jump right into it. What does it mean to be a commodity in business? As defined by businessdictionary.com, commoditization is almost a total lack of meaningful differentiation in the manufactured goods. Commoditized products have thin margins and are sold on the basis of price and not brand. This situation is characterized by standardized, ever cheaper, and common technology that invites more suppliers who lower the prices even further. All right? And just let's go through this definition again. Almost a total lack of meaningful differentiation in the manufactured goods. We're going to be talking about what meaningful differentiation is today. We're going to be talking about how you meaningfully differentiate in your goods and services that you sell. But this is the heart of it all. Almost a total lack of meaningful differentiation in manufactured goods. Commoditized products have thin margins or are sold on the basis of price and not brand. All of those things are absolutely disgusting to me, and they happen every day when we're dealing with customers. Here's an example, okay? This is a little something that I do for my customers, and it's called a sit blitz. And what a sit blitz is, everybody's familiar with a blitz. They're familiar with the different flavors of blitz, where you get together and you hit a certain marketplace, hit a certain territory, a certain zip code, and go out there and pound it, pound it, pound it, pound it, pound it. And you're trying, the whole idea is trying to generate things. I call them a game changer. You're trying to set that bar high. I always like to schedule sit blitz for my client companies at the beginning of the year to set that bar high, to give them something that they have to shoot for the rest of the year, to change it, to create a new normal. Now you might say, well, gosh, John, why do you have this in terms of, a commodity or commoditization? What are you talking about? Well, the problem is most people look at that new year as a place to start slow. Nobody looks at, saying, gosh, January we got to jump out of the gates. Well, they might say to themselves, we got to jump out of the gates, but they don't plan to jump out of the gates. As a result, they do the same thing as everybody else does. Let's just work our plan. Let's knock on some doors. Let's make some phone calls. Let's send out some emails. Let's do the things that we always do, instead of looking at things completely different. January 3rd is a brand new year. Let's hit the ground running. Let's do something big. Let's do something to change the normal. Let's move the bar and then set the bar so high that that's something that we've got to reach for the rest of the year. And like the old saying goes, when you reach for the stars, you may not always get the stars, but you're not going to come up with a handful of mud. Let's do something to change the game. Let's not be a commodity from day one of 2012, which is January 3rd. All right. So let's talk a little bit more and a little more in depth, all right, in terms of becoming a commodity. First step of becoming a commodity, we've got look, we've got feel, we've got touch, we've got visual, graphic, nonverbal, verbal, written, the way people perceive us out there in the marketplace, how they first get their image of who we are. And this sets the tone for everything going forward. And for this setting of the tone, I'm going to turn this over to Patrick Jebber, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about the visual, graphic, nonverbal, verbal, and part of the written as we go forward. Patrick, take it away.
Thanks, John. So we always start by saying go bold or go home, right? Because in terms of your brand, in terms of the way you sell, you want to take steps to distinguish your brand from everyone else. And when you do that, you're going to inevitably reap the rewards. So for the commodity aspect, which this is all about commodity, is how looking the same can create adverse effects, right? And this is so very important, and it's often overlooked when branding a business. Is it important to look at your competition? Yes. Is it important to build a brand that resonates with your customers? Obviously. Is it important to create a look that fits within your industry? Absolutely. But why do you want to look like everyone else? Well, we always kind of go back to society, right? By nature, we want to be different. We want to stand out from the crowd. But society has taught us to conform, right? It's not that old teenager thing, but it is a lot like it. I mean, if you remember back when you were a teenager and some kids rebelled and wore torn jeans in school or they got punk rocker hairstyles, they didn't look or dress the same as the status quo, right? And sometimes, depending on how outrageous they got, it caused them to get into trouble. In society, it's ingrained in all of us to look and act alike. So when it comes to business, you know, we do the same things. We buy the same color cars in our personal lives, black, white, silver. I mean, why do they have the highest resale values? We wear the same brands, et cetera, et cetera. But looking at, you know, those kids dressing different, they were onto something, because in business, it's good to be different. It's good to stand out and get our customers' attention.
Patrick, I got a question from a gentleman named Jimmy Key, and he's from Nebraska. And what Jimmy asked you is that in his particular line of work, he's a B2C, a business-to-consumer type salesperson. He said almost by necessity, a lot of his stuff looks similar to his competition. And he's wondering, and because he's a salesperson, how much, you know, control he has over it. You know, is there anything that you're going to be talking about today that kind of ties into that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be talking about a little bit about business to consumer in terms of products throughout. But if I don't touch on it, or if you have questions after we go through it, for sure I will answer that in more detail, or maybe you can ask a little bit more specific question, and I will definitely answer it.
Good. Okay.
I hope that helps.
I think so. Go ahead, Patrick.
So,
keep on going.
So you're to do this, you know, we always use Starbucks as an example, right, in terms of getting out from that commoditization. So building your brand consistency is obviously the first step, right? We always use them as an example because maybe it's my love for their coffee, probably. But regardless, if you like their coffee, one thing's for sure, right? They have created an amazing brand, and they've built a solid foundation of brand consistency. So much so that they demand that premium price, you know, something that you can get elsewhere for a fraction of the cost. And they've taken that idea of a commodity and flipped it upside down, right? Coffee is that commodity. I mean, if it's anything, it's a commodity. And they've taken that simple product like coffee and made people want it. You know, they make them want to pay more for it. Johnny, if you want to hit the next. So my example is, would you pay $4.90 for a cup of Folgers or Maxwell House, right? Probably not. And that's all because of the branding they've put in place. People know to expect it, and they love it. They happily give you $4.90 for a cup of coffee. Obviously, that's a soy cinnamon dolce, my preference.
There you go.
But not to say that these coffee brands aren't good, right? Or that Starbucks is actually any better than these brands. But they've created an impact in consumers, and they've created that demand, right?
Patrick, I have another question for you. Do you have a second? Can we jump in here?
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We have a Jim Bigley from Pompano Beach, Florida, and what Jim asks is, in terms of Starbucks versus regular coffee, you know, everybody. I'm paraphrasing too, Jim. So please, you know, by the way, you know, don't jump me for this one, and let me know if I go too far. He said in terms of Starbucks versus something else, you know, the reason why they pay so much obviously is the taste, the flavor, you know, those kinds of things. But he said what his question is when you have something that is tough to differentiate, okay, in terms of taste or flavor or look, you know, how do you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I always say start by building a want or a demand for it. You know, not necessarily, you know, there are a lot of people who will argue that Starbucks tastes better. There's a lot of people who will argue whether or not they should be $4.90 a cup. And that's the thing. Starbucks created that demand. So even if it's hard to differentiate, I mean, you know, if Starbucks had done some things very differently at the beginning, they could be sitting right next to Folgers or Maxwell House on a grocery store shelf, right? I mean, just because they are who they are doesn't mean that they did, you know, that they are better than those other brands. You have to create that perception. And you do that through the communication, through your marketing, through all of those things that get you to the consumer. Because once they see that, you know, it's like we always talk about Apple because, you know, they they're more expensive and they have these great looking products, right? And they demand more for their products because they say they're worth it. Well, it's all about relativity. I mean, you might not think they're worth it, but somebody else does, and enough people grows, it's that society thing we come back to where people will then say, well, you should try this, it's really good, and now you've got a bunch of people using the product, and they pay more for it, right? But they don't necessarily believe that they should be paying more for it, they do because they think that's the norm.
Gotcha.
So you're doing that through that brand consistency.
Gotcha.
And building it. So you can move on to that. So you do that, and that leads me in, actually, that question leads me into that creating impact, right? You know, not being afraid to stand out. It might seem scary at first, but it's actually a good thing. Now, don't get me wrong, right? When I say stand out, I mean take chances and create impact. I don't mean do something completely crazy and alienate all your customers. You know, you still need to keep your audience in mind when creating new marketing messages. You know, don't make the mistake of shocking customers necessarily. There's a big difference, and some brands rely on shock value, but they're, you know, most are better off with just standing out from the crowd. And how? Well, it's different for every company. So if there was an easy answer and one that could be adopted by every company, everyone would be doing it, right? And then we'd all be in the same exact place again, because everybody would be doing it and they'd be standing out. But it works best as a principle. And I always go back to the principle of creating impact. And that's why great brands work with people and help them execute. You know, they work with people who execute these principles, right? If you have a great idea but poorly executed, you know, the message, it suddenly becomes the worst idea ever. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of those examples. So, John, go ahead. So things to consider, right? And this kind of leads me in the worst idea ever. It wasn't necessarily the worst idea, but I love Apple products, right? I always talk about these. You know, people will call me a fanboy. But one thing's for certain, Apple knows how to take that product that's considered a commodity and demand a premium price for them. And some might argue that quality isn't any better than the PC counterparts, just like Starbucks, right? And I don't want to get into that debate because, you know, I'll argue it all day long. But you can't dispute that they are successful. But they weren't always. Now, the image in front of you is the Apple Newton. Does anybody remember this?
I do.
Yeah, I figured you would. It was a Palm Pilot, right? Before Palm Pilots. It was ahead of its time, right? People weren't ready for it, and it suffered a quick death. Now, remember, timing can change the customer's perspective entirely. You wouldn't send a holiday greeting 6 months early, unless, of course, you're in the retail business, and we can expect Christmas products in October. But it brings me to a good point. I can't tell you how often I hear people say, I can't believe that they have Christmas stuff up already. I'm not ready for Christmas. So you wouldn't invoice a customer right before they agreed to buy. It's all about the timing. So even when you have a great marketing message that you want to convey, consider the timing of it. You know, if there's, we often talk about company crisis plans, and sometimes people are in crisis. Well, and I'll give you an example here later on, but if you're in crisis, you don't necessarily want to tout a new product, right? It's going to get pummeled by all of the negative press that might be coming out about the crisis. That's, you know, maybe there was a company fire or something like that. So you want to be really careful on it, and timing is everything. The next thing to consider is the product, right? I mean, to redeem my beloved Apple, right? They came back in a big way after that Newton. You know, they had the iMac, the iPod, the iPad. But I'm showing the iPhone because it's a product that stood out from the crowd. I mean, you know, the iPad, there wasn't really any tablets that were successful up until that point. The iMac, you know, there were other computers in the market. The iPod, you know, some will say that it, you know, it was completely different because Walkmans were still around. But the iPhone moved into a space that had lots of other competitors. But the product mattered, and what it did differently mattered. And more importantly, it revolutionized that industry, right? We all know that not every product or service is going to revolutionize the way we do things, but they can feel like it, right? They can communicate and market themselves as game changers, but they don't have to be game changers in and of themselves. It's the marketing. It's like I was saying before, you know, Starbucks isn't necessarily greatest but they convey that they're the greatest. And what do? We believe them. And even when they're suffering, like they went through that whole, using Starbucks as an example, they went through that whole, they closed down all of their stores about a year ago, right? And they were retraining everybody. They were basically saying that, we realize our products aren't that great right now. We've got laxed at putting out a quality product, but we're going to make it better again. And it rejuvenated their sales, right? Because brands can be built and marketed in a way that they stand out from everyone else. And you don't need to be a game changer, a product or service or whatever it is to come across as a game changer, right? You can do that through your marketing. So last, right, but not least, is the message. And these seem so obvious, and I always say that a lot of things in marketing are common sense. They're business common sense, right? The message. I think everybody heard about the Netflix fiasco not that long ago.
Don't badmouth my beloved Netflix. Don't badmouth my beloved Netflix.
and I have Netflix too, but it all really boiled down to the message, right, that they put out to their customers and their utter lack of proper communication. Some might argue that they went bold, increasing their pricing, right? They might believe that they were trying to think differently by starting a completely new company called Quickster. Not the greatest idea, but the fact remains that they communicated poorly, and their customers and their intentions, whatever they were, stood out, but not in a good way. Customers, the thing to remember is customers want to matter. They want you to care about them. They want you to communicate that message. The most important, don't forget to communicate that message and communicate it well, because that makes all the difference in the world.
And I think you remember, Patrick, what happened. After they realized they made such a huge boo-boo, they went back and they just redoubled efforts to change their message. They dropped the whole Quickster idea. They, put out an email that said, sorry, mea culpa, about all of that. And, the problem with that, and you tell me if I'm wrong, the problem with that is the damage was done to the most part, for a lot of those people.
It was, and we see it by the stocks. They were getting hit hard, but one thing is they did learn in a way from their mistake. They made two mistakes. First, they communicated poorly that their price increase. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. They could have come back from that they could have come back from it sooner, and they could have come back from it a little more effectively. But what they did was then they said, well, to fix this problem, we're going to just pretend like it's another company. And that's really then what hurt them, because people were like, I don't even understand why you would do that. I like the service. It just was communicated really, really poorly. And I have the service, but one of the things I did, obviously, I ended up dropping the DVD solutions. But that's the thing, like they alienated a lot of people by that. But then they came back and they communicated, right? And they tried to be honest about it. And that's what I say, customers, they want you to care about them. And if they came off very cold at the beginning, but then towards the end, he said, it was a message from him, right? He said, yep. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
Too little, too late sometimes.
So in a nutshell, we go back to go bold or go home, right? You have to take those steps to distinguish your brand. And when you do, in terms of sales, right, you have other products that are very similar. And I'm going back to that original question that someone posed. I can't remember who was that.
Which question?
Oh, about the other products, and from a sales perspective, how does he help that?
Oh, goodness. You caught the host off guard. Keep on going.
That's okay.
Don't mind anything here. The man behind the curtain is doing everything right. Keep talking.
But yeah, it goes back to that. You might have products and you don't necessarily have control over the branding, but you do have a voice. And I always say, any employee is an extension of the brand. So if you feel that things should be either communicated more effectively, or if you're getting feedback from customers, you should be conveying that to whoever is in charge, because those are the things that inevitably matter. So the marketing can change and should if it's not effective. And you, from a sales perspective, always see that end result. So if it's not being effective, it has to come back. It has to boil up into the service and come back to someone who's in charge of making it happen.
Absolutely. And as we go forward here, I know what some of the questions on, and I'm getting some of these coming through, they're saying, folks are saying to me, don't bring this up, but what their concern is the fact that some of these things that Patrick are talking about are big picture stuff that they don't have a control over because they're either frontline sales management, mid-level sales management, or salespeople themselves, and as a result, they can't control look or things of that sort. That's okay, folks. You know, what Patrick wanted to do, and what I wanted Patrick to do at this first part, is to open up the Pandora's box of the different ideas, so the folks who can adopt and can make those things, to start thinking bigger picture and start thinking on a larger canvas. Now we're going to come back to things that you can affect on a local, on a personal basis, you know, going forward. So you're going to see how it all ties together as we go. So hopefully that answers about the 3 or 4 questions that came in here just in the last few minutes. All right. So speaking of which, let's just jump right into it. How and why do our products/services get commoditized? And as you see here, here's, you know, some examples of, you know, products and services that have gotten commoditized over the years. You got milk, you've got, you know, basic electronics, cell phones, you've got, you know, bread. First, let's, you know, look at those two in the middle. Okay, you've got, you know, the calculator. If anybody remembers how much the first calculators cost way back in the 70s, first calculator went for $25, $30. You had to pay for a calculator. Now, if you pay a fraction of that, if you pay 15% of that, you know, that's a lot of money for a calculator. And cell phones, a little bit similar time frame. If you remember back in the mid 80s to late 80s, those big silver things that you had to walk around with, they looked like you're calling in an airstrike. And then they had the lovely bag phones. And, you know, now you got things that are so small. You think of that one scene from the movie Zoolander where Ben Stiller plays a male model, and he's opening up his phone, and it's about the size of his thumb. Now, of course, that's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. Okay, everything goes through these trends, and milk and bread, same kind of thing. You know, it's everybody has milk, everybody has bread, but who does things differently? How do these things get commoditized? Well, let's talk about those ways they can get commoditized. First of all, there's advancing technology. Okay, to your left, you have one of the very first computers, okay, that had all these little bulbs and tubes that worked to get everything going. And this one was called the ENIAC. The ENIAC, and literally what you saw here was just one wall in a room. The room had all 4 walls that were like that, and it was connected to 2 other rooms with the very first computer. The next computer you see off to its right, you see that was something of circa 1970. If you watch one of those conspiracy movies from the 70s, like 3 Days of the Condor, you see them chatting away and tapping away on one of these little guys. And my point, by showing you that last picture of the folks with the little guy in the cart, it's the same thing. It's the buggy whip mentality. Do we sit there and say, oh gosh, advancing technology, that's what the problem is? And some of them might have heard our president saying that people have lost jobs because of ATMs, because of technology has changed the way travel agents have lost jobs because people do things online. But if you guys think about that for a second, what's the other side of that message? That we stay still, that we don't move forward as a community, as a world, as a group, that we don't continually advance. What's the message there? Well, we've got to. We're always going to advance. So technology is always going to change. So if your technology is changing around you and you have an older style product, well, we've got to think about other ways that we can affect things. Now, of course, a bigger picture, there's some things you can't do. If you don't work on the engineering team, you can't get in there. If you don't work on a team that decides on what products, you can't do that. But there are things you can control, and those are the things that we're going to be talking about here going forward. First up, a lack of a real and/or effective selling process is a huge thing that you can control. When you go out there, either as an agenda-driven salesperson or a salesperson who's just swinging from the hips, okay, just swinging from his heels, trying to get everything done, it can be perceived from the customer. They will see that. First, let's talk about the agenda-driven salesperson. That person who says, all I'm going to do is do it exactly this way, follows step by step by step by step. What happens if you miss a step? What happens if you forget something? Well, you do that. If you're too linear, well, what happens? Well, gosh, where do you go now? What do you do if things get thrown out of whack? You forget what the next step is. And because you haven't thought about things logically, because you haven't thought about what happens if a person throws a monkey into the wrench there and makes things a lot different, well, you're totally out of luck. And then here's the other side of the equation. The person goes in there with no plan. okay? And they're just shooting from the hip the whole time. Woo, let's try this. Yeehaw, let's give this a shot, right? There's always something in the middle that you can work on. You can't do that. You can't be so structured that you don't know where to go if one step falls apart, and you can't be so unstructured that you don't know a general direction to go. There's always that middle ground. You've got to have an effective, logical selling process, and we're going to talk about a couple of those pieces today. The first piece we're going to talk about are the different things that relate to that, okay, or the things that I call are the core effects on the selling process. Professional sales skills. There's some things you can't control if you're not good at them. If you don't know how to give a good 15 to 20 second elevator speech of who you are, if you cannot communicate, if you do not do continuous customer touching, if you do not do research and find out what your market intelligence and what's out there, if you don't understand where things are going in the marketplace, if you're worried about getting everything perfect before you move forward, there's nothing that you can do, all right? Professional selling skills can be so many things. Communication, same thing. We're going to talk about all these different issues as we go forward here, but the important thing to keep in mind is this. If any of these things are tweaked, if you're worried about, for example, being perfect all the time instead of just moving forward, what's going to happen is you're never going to move forward. There's a difference between perfection and excellence. Perfection is that everything's in line, nothing's wrong, it's the best thing, most perfect thing you've ever seen, and there's nothing out of shape. But guess what? That's not life. Excellence is doing things the absolute best you can every time, and that you bring everything to the fore. In the choice between the two, in moving forward, I'll take excellence because perfect happens so infrequently. How many times has something been perfect? All right? How many perfect football teams have we had in the NFL? Exactly one, and we had one fall by the wayside just last week. The great Green Bay Packers lost to the lowly Kansas City Chiefs. Perfect doesn't happen, but excellence can happen all the time. And I can go on and give you a ton of examples in between here, but I'm going to kind of take care of that as we move forward. Now, before I get going any further here, I've been talking for a little bit. I want to make sure that I answer some folks' questions. Anybody have any specific questions? Anything that I can answer for them before I move forward? Anything that they want to make sure that I cover as I go into this? I got something from JC Storm. Okay. I don't see anything out of the ordinary so far, just so you know. Everybody's asking questions of things we're going to be covering, so okay. Nothing out of the ordinary. Okay. I'm going to keep on rocking and rolling. I didn't see anything crazy come up here. Okay. First, little chart we've got here from Marketing Sherpa. Okay. Chart, what it talks about is relevancy, okay, or relevant email. And if we look to the far left, okay, we have the different chart samples. And so the dark red is for consumer or B2C, the medium red is for B2B, and then the pink represents both B2B and B2C. And if we look at the print below the charts themselves, the chart to the far left says relevant email communications are sent on time to a segmented audience with a clear conversion goal. And if we look at that in a business to consumer and a business to business, less than a third of the time do companies actually make sure people get relevant information and sent on time to a proper segmented audience. Less than a third of the time. This, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely abhorrent. This is commoditization in its worst form. Next, business to business channel, okay, or I'm sorry, next one. Email campaigns are sent close to the launch date or a partially segmented audience with somewhat clear conversion goal. Less on the B2C side, a little bit more on the B2B side, okay, and then on average about a third. Again, terrible, terrible numbers. And how often do email messages get sent to a target date, the entire in-house subscriber list with an unclear conversion goal and not relevant content? I mean, we're talking about huge numbers here. And you want to talk about something that makes commodities? This makes commodities. And the big word that we're talking about here is relevancy. We are in an idea economy, folks, all right, an idea economy. The only way to move forward in an idea economy is become a thought leader. And, somebody might say to me, well, gosh, John, I have a product that's a consumer product. There's not a whole lot to it. Well, I would argue saying there's always something else to it. There's always another direction that you can take. And I'll use this example. One of the things that the cable companies are doing now is they're offering phone service on top of their existing cable or their cable HD digital service, however you want to call it, and also their internet service. What's my point? Now they're offering phone service too. You should hear the questions that they've got these people asking now, and they're fantastic. The questions that they asked us when we were talking about switching, always looking to switch, see if we can get a better deal from somebody else. I won't tell you the names of each company, but there are two major ones. We were looking to switch from one to the other. The people were asking us, what kind of phones do we, or what's our phone system like right now? We told them, we basically work completely off cell phones. We don't have a home phone. And they were like, oh, really? Well, what happens if you have an emergency? What happens if your cell phones are down? What happens when you have to call 911? And everybody knows this. They're asking good, detailed questions. They're finding a way to make us think. They are becoming a thought leader. We're talking about cable. One of the ultimate things when thought of as being a commodity that most people only look at for price to make a switch. But they were making us think about how we use our phone service and how they could bundle it together and make everything cheaper for us. What a great job. We are in an idea economy, folks. If we do not become a thought leader, we are destining ourselves to be a commodity. And what we're talking about in that is relevancy, okay? Relevancy. The first part of relevancy is segmentation. And let me explain what I'm talking about here with these different data circles. And as you know, there's many times we have, different pieces of your database that cross over, okay? And they cross over and they meet right here in the middle, and they'll cover whatever, okay? And you've got these people, they all do this basic same kind of stuff. That's okay. You're going to have that, and that's going to happen. But most times, you're going to have different segments of your database, and they're all going to be interested in different things, and that's okay too. The question is, are you taking time to make sure that the information that you have and that you're getting to them is segmented correctly? Now, when they're put together like this, and you can make sure that they get things and that everybody's getting similar things, that's one thing, all right? And there's not a problem with that. But the thing that most people don't do is they don't take into account the segmentation. Think about that. Think about how your business is broken up. Think about where your business goes. Think about all the different types of people you sell to. And you might say, well, gosh, John, all I sell is to one type. No, you don't. That one type, I guarantee you, has different customers than they've ever done before. Remember one of the very first things we talked about when it came on, I asked Patrick, what kind of marketplaces have you sold into? Okay. Or I rephrase, I didn't ask Patrick. We were asked, it was a question that came up. What kind of marketplaces, have you sold into? And he said virtually, a lot of them. And I said pretty much the same thing. My point is even when you're doing that, you sell into a lot of marketplaces and you think that you're in one, they're selling to a lot too. They might say that they're only selling into one type, but that one type can have many variations. Segmentation, segmentation, segmentation. The next thing about relevancy is content. And as we've heard before from different folks in different lines of work, we've heard this said before. Content is king. And why? Because it is. What you put into what information goes out is going to make the difference in what they hear or see. If you don't have the right content and it's going to the wrong segment, you've just wasted whatever money that you're spending on whatever lead generation effort. It's got to have the right content, and it's got to be based on the segment that it's going out to. If not, don't waste your time, don't waste your money, and you know what? I would say, go into teaching. Try something new. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about finding information from some different outlets. All right. Now, what I did here is I took a sample from different people who have logged in. Reason why I ask what company you're with is so I can find out a little bit of information about the industry that you're in. And here are some different websites that relate to some of the different people who are here today. All right, we have, for example, in the middle here, Coatings World. All right, we have some people who do industrial as well as decorative coatings. We have Mobility Aid. We have some people here who sell a lot of things in the mobility world. Things like gosh, spit out, John. Wheelchairs, electronic scooters, those types of things. We have people who sell B2C, savvy consumer. We have people in the printing industry, printinghub.org. We have people in general industry, Industry Week. My point is the info outlets are out there to find this information. There are a lot of things that are out there. You've got to go out there and find that, though. You know your industry better. Now, here's the thing. I'll offer to help you guys. I'll do that for you, too. I'll ask you the questions to help you find these things. But at the end of the day, if you're not going out and finding the relevant information that hits the different segments that you're in, there's not a thing that you can do, or rephrase it, not a thing that I can do to help you. It's all going to be about you finding information for the people that are out there that you're trying to get it to. Become a thought leader. We are in an idea economy. Next part of this, okay? Once we've developed this content and we've got it together and we're segmenting, we've got the right information, we find our information outlets. Now it's about lead generation, or coming up with a continuous contacting system, or what I call a SIT lead generation system. Stay in touch. All right. We come up with all this information. Now let's not let it go to waste. Let's actually use it to do something. And what I'm talking about is coming up with an inventory of SIT touches. All right. Social media. Let's talk about that. For those of you who follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or even on my Facebook page, you see how I put my stuff out there. And I'll tell you real quick what my schedule looks like. My first info touch goes out at 7 o'clock in the morning. The next one goes out between 8 o'clock and 8:30. The next one goes out at 9 o'clock. That I don't do anything until 11 o'clock. Next one after that goes out at 2 o'clock, then 3 o'clock, and then nothing goes out until 7 o'clock. And then I go do one at 7 o'clock and 8:30. Why do I do them at those times? Because the research that I found, the people that I'm looking to reach, the decision makers, the people who are the highest in the organization, that's when they are checking things like social media. All right, and the information that I'm trying to get out to them. Intro letters, initial calls, continuing education touches, industry articles, some of which I'm going to show you some examples of. All these different things, okay, info education call. Let's give you an example of an intro letter here, okay. First, let me show you something funny. Okay, that's a picture of a human spine, okay? It's an x-ray type picture, and you see how the human spine is highlighted. Now what I do is I actually take this picture that you see here, folks. I take this and I put it on a transparency sheet, so it looks like it's an x-ray. And then I attach it, or I don't attach it, but then I include this letter in there, okay? And here's what the letter says. For instance, Dear Dan, date comes in automatically, so not that I sent it on the 19th, but you get the idea. Dear Dan, sales is the backbone of any organization. The question is how strong is your spine? And then I ask them some bullet points. What level of people are you hiring? A to A potential, or somebody to fill your team? What is the production/skill level of your current team, and when was the last time this was monitored and measured? How frequently are you working with your team to help them develop the skills they need to be successful? Are your salespeople generating enough quality leads and opportunities to hit their goals in 2011? And what about 2012? Are quotas going up or down? How many lead generation events did you conduct in 2011? What did they produce, and how many are scheduled for 2012? And then finally, what is your lead generation plan around trade shows? What type of schedule and planning and touches you have for 120 days prior to 120 days past a trade show? All good points for people to start thinking about. Now, so far, have you seen one thing about my company, one thing about Matrix Impact? All I've done is ask questions. Increasing sales is a company-wide issue that affects your organization in every way and plays one of, if not the most important role in the overall health of your business. It's also the area where we can help you. Matrix Impact averages a 42% growth in sales revenue with our clients, and we can help you too. We will be following up soon to discuss this and how we can work together and grow your company's sales revenue. Thanks for your time. This letter, combined with that picture of the spine, I sent out 35 of those letters, very targeted, very segmented. Out of those 35 that I sent out, I scheduled 15 appointments. Out of those 15 appointments, so far I've closed 5 pieces of business, and I still have X number of appointments to go. My point, do something different. Do something that stands out. Try something. You can also do information touches. Let me show you one of my favorite articles that I like to send out to folks that always gets a response. Now, I haven't calculated this one because this one I've been doing over the years. You'll see how old this article is actually. Let's see. This article is actually about 4 or 5 years old now. Lead nurturing, cultivating relationships and growing sales through continual dialogue. Sounds like SIT, doesn't it? Lead nurturing, commonly referred to, blah, blah, blah. Let's go down to the highlighted portion. However, as he described his specific tactics, it became evident that he was inappropriately grouping all prospects into one nurturing funnel and treating all prospects in the exact same manner. Segmentation. All right. Part of the definition of lead nurturing is to provide relevant information tailored to the prospect, assuming that prospects have unique needs, priorities, and time frames. Scheduling batch communications is far from ideal. My point, I'd rather send out 35 to 50 things that are highly targeted and make follow-up calls than to send out 500 things and hope that I'm going to make 10 or 15 calls off of that. All right? Folks, we've got to find unique things. We've got to find things that make us a thought leader. We've got to find things that push us apart from the crowd, that keep us from being a commodity, that make us a thought leader so people look at us differently. Then, of course, there's the sales skills portion of the thing. We're only going to talk about 2 articles in the sales skill, and that is questions and proposals. And to do that, I'm going to use a demonstration of a proposal. I've seen way too many times people, give me a proposal and say, this is what one of our proposals look like, this is what we do. And what it basically is an invoice with a couple bullet points of scope of what they cover. And they, it's a 1, maybe a 2-page proposal, and they say, oh yeah, and we, the first page is all about their company, all about XYZ Corporation and how cool they are. If you do stuff like that, folks, I promise you, all you're going to get is heartache from that. All you're going to get is heartache. So let me kind of backward in questions and proposals by opening up a proposal and show you exactly what I'm talking about. This is from, this is from a flooring company that does poured floors, or what's called a liquid polymer on their floors, and they can make a lot of different designs for that. They've done things, with restaurants. They've done things with what's it called? In the hotels, the splash water parks, those types of things. They've done things all along the realm for these, and this is what their proposal would look like. Okay, and that they've actually done in a certain situation. First thing is they have a title for it: flooring design for pleasing look, safety, and ease of maintenance. The ultimate 30,000-foot view. One of the very first questions that they're going for is, tell me what you're looking for. We're looking for flooring that's designed for pleasing look, safety, and ease of maintenance. Those were exact words from the customers of Dr. Tammy Hicklin and Rick Flegel. All right, and if we go a little bit further here, a little bit about the company itself, and then the overview of the company. Overview a little bit about what they're looking for, a little more of the 30,000-foot view. Now let's go to the objectives. Okay, objectives. What are they actually looking for? Flooring that provides a clean and professional appearance, long-term durability that can stand up to 15 or more years of traffic, improved cleanability, a surface that provides a more sterile, hygienic surface. These were all things that the customer asked for. How did they find these things out? By asking them, what are the things that you're looking for in a floor? What's that? Now, after they found out what these objectives were, the next thing was what's the value that these objectives actually provide? All right, and look at how they match up. Okay, flooring that provides a clean and professional appearance matches up with the creation of a more attractive flooring system will appeal to current and potential customers, that instantly communicating the high standards of which you operate your business. You always got to match those up. Point number 2, long-term durability. Bodytech's PEP system has helped ensure excellent long-term durability with a minimal effort. Point number 3, improved cleanability. Our flooring is easy to maintain and can be done using simple cleaning products such as bleach and soap. And then number 4, surface that provides more sterile, hygienic surface. The seamless nature of our flooring eliminates potential for fluids, blah, blah, blah. All of them match up. And so do the value to measures of success, and on and on. And those are all the questions you're going to ask. You might say, well, gosh, John, these are the statements that are putting in the proposal, but the way that you find out what to put in the proposal is based on the questions. Now, when I send you guys out a copy of this webinar, I will also send you out a copy of this proposal. The trick is to think of the questions that need to be asked to get the information. Think of the information you need to sell something. And those are the questions that you're going to ask, and that's the information that's going to go into a proposal. And as we go further through the proposal, what do we see here? Not just, what they're looking for, but then we go into the scope of work. And then we go into guidelines of how things are going to be installed, and even more into the guidelines. Then we go into a total inclusion addendum, letting them know everything that's going to be included in this sale, everything that's going to be covered with that. And then we go more into the scope of work, arrive at the job site, everything's going to happen, step 1, step 2, step 3. And then finally, 7 pages later, we finally get into the price. My point, the least important page in the entire presentation is the price. Yet why is it one of the first things that we sell? If we give customers what they want, which is the price, when we first start off, if the first thing that they see is the price, they don't need anything else from us, and they're not listening to us at that point. Give them all the information that they told us. That's why conducting a good discovery is so, not crucial, critical in terms of the overall process. The questions we ask gives us the information we need to go into proposal, so we're not handing out a 1- or 2-page proposal that has a couple bullet points and price. I promise you, if you're doing that, you're following one of those things that I talk about in negotiating. You're negotiating 2 out of every 3 times, and I promise you, you're dropping your price to try and match folks. You want people to look at you as the Cadillac, not as the Kia. The Cadillac, not the Kia. Yes, it is a car reference. All right. And finally, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that comes from asking the questions and doing things right and being a thought leader. They know if they're getting something specifically targeted for them, and they're getting content that you know, that they know that you had to research for them, that you're asking questions that are about them, and you're repeating what they said and putting that in the proposal, they know that you care now. And then they're going to start caring about you and what you want. I'm not telling you that they're going to worry about if you make profit, but they are going to be thinking about you in a different way. They're going to be thinking about you as a business person and not a salesperson, and most importantly, not as a commodity. Folks, that's about it for today. I mean, we've covered about every different way we can look at it. There's a lot of things that go into this, all right? And there's a lot of things that we're going to be exploring as we go further. But I think what you've seen today between, Patrick talking about some of the big picture stuff of how a brand looks, how a brand feels, how people perceive the brand, and how I got into a little bit more about the information in terms of the thought, in terms of the content, in terms of segmentation, in terms of the questions, in terms of the proposal. All things that are critical when we go forward and we stop people from trying to commoditize us or commoditize our product or service. All right, let's talk about who won what today. Winner of Great Choice by Jim Collins is Warren Williams. Warren Williams of Rubbermaid Newell Products. Warren, you still out there? I see you still on. Congratulations, Warren. We'll be contacting you to make sure that we get your information and we can get you out to your book, Great by Choice by Jim Collins. Today's winner of Best Question goes to somebody who asked something that I actually didn't cover, but his name is Marek Zelenka. Marek Zelenka, he's coming from the Czech Republic, and his question was, John, when it comes to the questions you ask, what is the most important thing to find out? And as you heard, I kind of went into that in a little bit of detail, so I didn't want to treat that as something special. But I thought that was the best question that I heard because it was a question about questions. Winner of Most Participative today would have to go to, let me see, let me count up all the hands raised and all the questions asked. Winners of the Most Participative goes to Emily Disquette. Emily is that Disquette? D-I-S-Q-U, Disquette. Apologize for not being able to pronounce it, but Emily, we'll just call you Emily. Emily, great name. That's the name of my daughter. So, Emily, you get winner of most participative. Those two winners?
That's not why you picked her, right, John?
What's that?
I said, but that's not why you picked her.
No, not in the slightest, folks. There's no boogeyman here. It was because she had her hand up the most and she asked the most questions. So that's why she got picked. But thank you so much, Patrick, for introducing that air of impropriety to the services here. Appreciate that. Okay, and what each of those get, they get a 1 hour of consultation time with John Kalensik for free. Please, I will be in contact with you as well to let you know exactly when we can schedule that and move that forward. Also, folks, so I know part of my Christmas present to you this year is, and I know this takes a little bit of the edge off of things, but I want to give everybody 1 hour of time talking about the SIT Blitz. Anybody who contacts me and wants to talk about a SIT Blitz, it's 1 hour free talking about what a SIT Blitz is, how it can help them generate leads, and that's for anybody who contacts me. That's a Christmas present from Matrix Impact to the crowd out there. Patrick, did you have something that you wanted to offer to everybody for Christmas time?
Yeah, we were offering an hour as well of consultation on branding, brand management, and any of the marketing communications information that we were talking about earlier. We do mobile development, email marketing. So if you have any questions about social media engagement, those kinds of things, we can help you out.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. So anybody, contact me or contact Patrick so you know when you get the information, you're going to get much more contact information from Patrick. You can contact him directly too. You don't have to use me as a middleman. A couple other things while we're on the board. Get free access to Sold Magazine. Everybody who signs up today is allowed to get a free subscription to Sold Magazine. Just go to soldlab.com/subscribe. Folks, I use this magazine. I'm quoted in this magazine. A lot of my articles are published in this magazine. That's not the only reason I like it. The reason I like it, and I first uncovered it, was when I was looking for more information about selling. And I wouldn't sell something to you or give something to you that I didn't think I got something out of. And I'm telling you, Sold Magazine's got the goods. Remember, folks, also, fantastic sales forum, my newsletter. Please feel free to subscribe to it. And the folks who are on the list already, you make sure you tell your friends. There's a, tell a friend about it as well. matricimpact.com/FSF. You can reach me, of course, at matriximpact.com as well as buildyoursalesmachine.com. And finally, folks, you can either make excuses or you can make sales, but you can't do both. Merry Christmas from Matrix Impact. Merry Christmas from Monsters Unlimited and Patrick Jebber. Folks, we wish you the best in the new year of 2012, and we wish you nothing but sales, prosperity to come. All right. Questions. How can I help anybody out? Any questions for me? Any questions for Patrick? All right. First question, Aaron Shaughnessy. Aaron's contacting us from the British Isles. Aaron, how are you doing today? Thank you. What's the weather like over there? Where are you at? She's actually in Ireland. Aaron, what's the weather like in Ireland today, in Dublin? Cold and rainy. Well, in Cleveland, it's warm and rainy, actually, which is weird, but it's cold and rainy over in Ireland. Aaron, what's your question today? Question for Patrick. Patrick, when it comes to designing a website and branding, do you have any 2 or 3 main guidelines that you're looking for in branding, when you're talking about a website?
Yeah, I would probably say, the first thing is it should maintain that consistency of your brand, right? You want it to be an extension of your brand, so have it look, feel the same way as all of your other marketing materials, because when somebody comes to it, let's say you send them a letter, you send them a postcard, you send them anything else, an email, when they go to it and they recognize that they're in the right place, that's how they do it, right? They see that brand consistency. The other is, keep it simple and straightforward. I can't tell you how many times we've come into the mix when a client has a website that is way too complicated. People get confused when they're navigating it, and it ends up driving them away. So the simplicity, keep it straightforward. One of the things that John and I had talked about recently is how often we're starting to see larger companies coming back to us from I would say the 2000s, right? Early 2000, it was really big deal to make a very giant website. In the early days, people just wanted brochure-based websites, and then they wanted these giant conglomerates of websites where they told every single thing they could possibly tell about their company. And now what companies are doing, they're taking a step back and they're saying, look, this is one, it's too hard to manage, and two, it's just too much information where people are getting bombarded and we're not getting the leads that we should be. So they're taking a step back and they're saying, let's simplify it, right? Simplify what we tell and lead them to the next action, which should be either calling or emailing. You should be definitely tracking, your web statistics so you can kind of see who's coming to the site. You should be able to follow up with them in some way, shape, or form if you're providing them some sort of information. So, and that which is the third thing, which is have a way for them to give you their information and you follow up with them. And I always say by doing that, you need to give them some sort of incentive, right? Whether it's a white paper or something that's going to help them. If it's a consumer B2C type thing, maybe you're giving them away some sort of rewards program that gives them percentage off of whatever the product is. In the past, we've had pizza shops, let's say, give away, free pizza, or they get special deals that nobody else gets because they've signed up through their website. So those are things to consider that will definitely help your lead generation from the site.
Okay. Next question I have from Tom Rosenkrantz. It's for me. And Tom said that I went through the proposal and the question section pretty fast, and yes, I did. But my question, but his question is what more detail can I give you when it comes to asking the questions that I didn't go into? Well, that's a great question, Tom, and I understand exactly where you're coming from. Okay, I had to give you as much as I can and tie the questions and the proposals together. But here's the easiest way I can tell you to do that. Think of your your 6 friends: who, what, why, where, when, and how. Think about those. Okay, and let me back up even more. You always have logistical questions. I don't care what your product is, how technical it is, how specific it is. You always have logistical questions. What size, how many, what color. Those are things that you always have to answer, okay, that you've got to get the answer for. Those are 30,000-foot view questions. And the bad sales reps, the commoditized sales reps, that's the bulk of their proposal. Those types of questions. Logical, simple, logistical, okay, when it's just about color, about size, about space, about when they're coming in to install. That's the bulk of the proposal plus cost. What you've got to ask are the who, what, why, where, when, and hows. The affect questions, A-F-F-E-C-Ts, the things that will affect what you are doing. You've got to find out, if you put this in, what does that mean to the customer? If you put in X, Y, Z, what does that mean to them actually doing it? If you don't know what the effect is, then how in the world can you sell something, and how can there be any value? If somebody says, I'm looking for a red car, and you said, sure, we've got red cars. Well, that's great, but why are they looking for a red car? Are they just seeing if they have a red car on the lot, or if they're asking for a red car because red's their favorite color and it's their lucky color, and because they have red cars it's always meant X, Y, Z? Well, if that's the case, then there's a lot of value that they've put into that color red, and that's things that you can play on when you put your proposal together. But if you don't ask an affect question, you can't find that out. So my point to you, your 6 friends: who, what, why, where, when, and how, and affect questions. Don't just let them say, I'm looking for this. Don't just let folks say, this is what I'm trying to get. Why are you trying to get this? What does that mean to you? If you get this, what will that give to you? Okay? And do me a favor. Do me a huge favor. Leave out those stupid questions that are like, if I do this, will you? That's not a question. That's a death sentence. Yours. All right? Customers know what you're doing. Do not say, if I can, will you? They know what you're trying to do is trap them with some kind of trial close. Ask questions that affect them. Let customers know how much they mean to you, and they will let you know how much you mean to them. Mr. Rosencrantz, you got that one? All right. Next one, Tomas Gurka from Romania, and this one's for me and Patrick. Patrick, the gist of Tomas's question is how do you go from leads that come into the website to conversion? I'll let you kind of start, and then I'll add to whatever you might say off of that, Patrick.
Well, I mean, you obviously want to have some sort of form that you get the leads from. Into conversion, you then put them into a list or a database where you're converting them into some sort of action. So a lot of times what we do is we put them into our email blasting service. And I say blasting, but really that's what they call them, email service. And we follow up with them, and we start that communication and that dialogue between us and the customer. So if they contact us and they want more information about web development, we usually start that. I mean, if they're signing up for something, if they want just specific information, we just start communicating with them. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is that you always come back to it's about communication and customizing that to each person. So like John was talking about segmentation, if they're signing up for a list, you should be segmenting it. If they're signing up to get more information about something, you should be contacting them personally and finding out what their needs are.
And my take on that is this: somebody signs up for something and you get it submitted, you jump on that. You don't sit there and wait. You don't say, let's give that some time to percolate. As soon as they submit that information, same day if possible, you should be calling them or contacting them however they requested you to contact them. And in my case, what I do is, even if if somebody has signed up for a website, or I'd rephrase it, somebody signed up for a newsletter or signed up for one of the services that I provide, free of charge, my first thing is I pick up the phone and I call them. And I ask them why they're signing up for this. Again, treat it just like the questions with the proposal. Why are you doing that? What's the effect of that? What are you trying to get done by signing up for my newsletter? Signing up for my sales, my sales and input, my sales impact blast. What is it that you want to see happen? And sometimes it has nothing to do with my newsletter. Maybe it's something that they're trying to get more ideas. Maybe they're trying to rebuild their information. Maybe they want to go back into my archives to figure out exactly what I talked about in terms of sales management or closing or whatever. But that's why I pick up the phone and make that phone call. Do not wait. Sales get cold. People get cold. They forget about you because once they're sitting there, they're researching whatever it is. They they fill out their form, and it goes over to you, and then you forget to call them for a day, till it's something that comes along on your to-do list. Somebody fills out a form on your website and it comes across. You call them that day. Period. End of sentence. Patrick, would you concur with that?
Absolutely. I always say, if you create that expectation, a lot of times you'll see on a website, we'll contact you within 1 business day. If you create that expectation and then you call them or email them right away, you're exceeding their expectations immediately. So, going back to what you're saying, John, that can only be beneficial to you because as soon as you start exceeding expectations, people are going to look at you in a positive way, creating that positive brand experience.
Next question is from Greg Wright. It's for Patrick specifically, but I think it has a little bit of me in there, but I'll see what Patrick can do with it at first. Patrick, the question is, when talking about brand and look, and you're going and talking to your managers and the feedback that you're getting from your customers about what they think, how forceful do you think you can be with management about the look, the brand, customers' perception? What would you do?
Well, you say forceful, but I don't necessarily think it needs force. It needs just action. A lot of times you're just being honest with whoever that is, the managers, the brand managers, the marketers, whoever is doing the communicating. Just be honest with them. I mean, we're in this world now where everybody is made to be transparent. I mean, we have social media. We have all of these different outlets that people expect transparency from the companies, right? And if you're the front line and you see people responding and maybe they don't necessarily see it, it can't hurt anything to just say, look, this is what I'm seeing, from customers. Is there anything that we can do about it? And just be honest. I don't necessarily think it even requires force. It's just making them aware of it, because sometimes people higher up don't necessarily know those things. Sometimes they're not tracking it. Sometimes, there's an infinite amount of, equations, but it all comes back to don't feel like you're forcing it. Just feel like you need to make them aware of it. It's not going to be on you to make it happen necessarily, but you can always spark that. You could be that catalyst, so to speak, to making change and helping you inevitably, because that does help you close your sales.
And Patrick, I agree with you 100% there, and I've got a slightly angled take on that. Yes, not to be forceful, absolutely. Bring it to their attention. This is part of what I call managing up. There's going to be things, because a lot of times managers don't get into the field, that you need to let them know what that real-time feedback is. If you don't do that, if you don't step up and say, this is what I hear going on, well then, a pox upon your house. You can control some of your own destiny, all right, by bringing these things up. A good manager is going to listen to you and they're going to say, oh gosh, that's something I haven't thought of before. And, John, why don't you give me some more examples of that so I can make something happen from that? They're going to do something like that. A bad manager won't, okay? But here's another way that you can affect this and get this moving. Don't be a commodity to your manager. Don't be a B player. Don't be an average, mediocre sales rep. Bust your butt. Become an A player. And then when you tell them these are what customers are saying, and you back it up with documents from the customer saying that, and you can say, listen, this is what they said, and they said to call them if you've got any questions. Then they're going to listen to you, because an A player bringing in X dollars of revenue, that's going to mean something to the managers, and that's going to light a fire under them to get them to move. Does it mean being forceful? No. It means being better at your job, not being a commodity to your boss, just like you're trying not to be a commodity to your customer. Does that answer your question there? All right. Next one is from Hart Leifson. He's from the Netherlands, and Hart has a question for me, and I think, Patrick, you'll have a take on this one as well. and it's in terms of proposal look. And you said the proposal that your first question was, is he going to get a copy of the proposal? Yes, like I said, everybody get a copy of the proposal that I used today. But he was asking about specifically, do proposals have to be formatted a certain way? He saw that there was, the design on the side and the certain kind of, the letterhead format. Is that what's important, or is what's important, or is there some combination? Well, the answer is yes. It's some combination, meaning you don't want to have something that just looks plain and ordinary, because then, again, you become a commodity. You want to look, as Patrick states, go bold or go home. Stand out. Look different. Do something that looks different than what everybody else does. If you're a halfway decent salesperson, I promise you that you've probably collected proposals, competitive proposals from other people. If you haven't, get on the stick and start asking your customers for competitive proposals, things that are sitting in their drawers from people that you've competed against in the past, so you can see what they're doing and find out what they're doing, and then do something different, do something that looks better, do something that I'm talking about here, about objectives, values, and measures of success. Do something that's going to stand out from the crowd. So yes, you want something that looks different, but the content is most important. But the bottom line, though, is if it's not visually striking, you might lose some people right off the bat. Patrick, you want to take on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, people are visual animals, right? We're beasts, and we beasts. And I'm just talking specifically about you, John. But, immediately we go from the visual, right? I mean, the content comes next. You just want something that pulls them in, and then the content is going to keep them there. So visually, you should always have something that creates that impact, right? Something we talked about in the webinar itself. But once you create that impact, then it's all about you pulling them in, saying, look, we can do this better, and give those the value of what you're doing, of the objectives. So yeah, absolutely.
Next question comes from, is this right? Susan Cage, K-U-G-E, Cage like Gage, okay, Susan. And Susan's question was about the proposal. Again, a lot of questions about the proposal today. John, how many times when you do a proposal like this do they close on the first try, or close on the first time you ask them? Susan, I don't have any exact numbers for you on that one. Okay, I can tell you on a case-by-case scenario. I can tell you for me. I can't tell you, across the board. What I can tell you is, though, for instance, the folks, the particular customer that you're going to see the proposal coming from, Body Tech, what they found was that their closing percentage went from 20% to 50% immediately after starting to use that without changing anything else. They also found that the number of first-time closes that they went tripled, meaning when the first time that they went through the proposal, they stopped getting that, oh, that sounds interesting, let me get back to you, or oh, let me talk to somebody else. It tripled. So for every one time that they, when they used to get a close, they now got 3 times a close, which meant what? They have more cash flow, things move along faster, and they raise their closing percentage 50%. So if they used to close 100 things, they're now closing 150 things. And that's just one organization. For myself, I've been using it forever, and quite frankly, my numbers are a little skewed only because I mainly deal with referred accounts. Very few times am I doing things that are fresh, quote unquote, new contact type stuff, and my numbers are in the mid 80s in terms of doing a proposal. So it's a little bit skewed, but a real life company, 50% that they raised their closing just from doing that, and they saw a 3 times change in the number of times that they got first call closes to when they used to get it. Fantastic numbers. What else do we got out there? All right, we've got that one. It's got a couple that are kind of similar. I'm going to combine a couple here. And we've got, okay, let's combine this one. Teddy Marisek, Frank Rohn, Teddy Marisek, Frank Rohn. Who else we got in the same category here? We'll just use you two because I've got a couple folks who are asking similar type stuff. And this one again is a combination for Patrick and myself. Patrick, I'll let you lead it off. Here's the question: they want to know, and this kind of goes off the subject of just commoditization, but in terms of lead generation, how important is it, when you're doing the lead generation, in terms of having something that's brand specific or has a significant brand look on a first initial contact, that they get something from you?
Well, I mean, obviously we're in the business of branding, right? So we're going to be a little biased, but it's proven fact that every piece should be branded well. Whether it's the very first thing that you send off, whether it's an email, whether it's whatever. I'll give an example. One of the things that we had talked about with a company, they were having issues with their brand, issues with their communications. And simple things like having the same signature line across the whole company for all the people in the company. So they would have it start off with their name, their position, the company's name, phone numbers, emails, right? Their Twitter or their LinkedIn hyperlink or whatever it is at the end of the signature line, and kept them all consistent. And when they did that, they noticed a big increase in terms of people clicking through and linking to them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, whatever, but also people responding more quickly, because they started to see, well, everybody has the same consistent approach to the way that they answer the same questions. If you ask 5 people in your company, they should all say the same thing. If the question is, what does your company do? All 5 people should be doing the same thing. And same thing with, that's kind of what the signature line is. It's just a simpler fashion, a simpler approach, but everything should be consistent. And it should have part of the brand in it. So if it's a logo or if it's just the company name, whatever that is, as long as it's identifiable to you, it's very, very important in every piece that you send out.
Yeah, and to take that to the next step, or maybe it's in the middle of that step somewhere, what I hear is the same thing. It's when people have multiple contacts, in many companies you have to have multiple contacts within that company, from the customer perspective. You might be dealing with the salesman, but then you also got to deal with an engineer or with a customer service rep or something like that. And when everything looks different, they wonder, what the heck's going on over at that joint? What do they got going on? And that's the whole thing. That consistency of look and feel. There's a comfort factor that goes into that, and I think that's the way I would phrase it, Patrick. A comfort factor, that people feel comfortable because they're seeing the same thing, and what that tells them is there's a consistency of how things are done, and it's not everybody's running off. It's not that everybody's running off doing their own thing all the time. They're doing a lot of different things. They're doing a lot of different things, and what results is they're looking at themselves as, oh gosh, we're not doing this, or this company runs off at the handle over here. But instead they see somebody, a company that runs things the same all the time, consistency, and there's a comfort factor that goes along with that. And for anybody that heard anything that was just going on there, sorry about that. That was my 3-year-old coming in with our dog. So that was a little noise in the background that kind of put me off there for a quick second. Sorry about that. All right, let's see what other kind of questions we got. Patrick, did you hear any of that in the background?
I heard something, but I couldn't tell what it was.
Yeah, it was. That's what kind of threw me off my game for a second. Yeah, as my 3-year-old coming in there with my dog, which is also the joy of doing webinars, folks. Being able to do things like this, talking to folks all over the world from my house. All right, what kind of questions I got? Nothing. Just give it a second or two. Nope, that's about that. All right, folks, this will wind up our broadcast day. For the last 35 or so people who are left online here, thank you so much for hanging out and asking some questions. We really appreciate it. And again, Merry Christmas to everybody. Patrick, any last messages for everybody?
No, I hope everyone has a great holiday and start to an awesome new year. So we'll talk to you soon. Absolutely.
Remember, folks, end strong, start large. January 18th, next webinar. We are out of here. Have a good one. Bye-bye.